Hello everybody, Anthony's here, and this time-lapse I will cover how I created the helmet design. I didn't really cover the suit yet. I'll just talk about this helmet design and how I was developing it. So I'll start with my base mesh head, and in this particular case I wanted to use the curve tool. And you can see the alpha I'm using on the right top panel, just disappeared right now, but big square essentially. And I'm using with a lot of thickness, a lot of depth essentially. To have I was it kind of makes me think that way. It kind of starts I start to think in this big chunky ways if I use that brush. While I had other sketch videos where I used a really thin brush, like really thin planes, and that introduces a different type of thinking as well. So every time I play around with like alpha of the brush, switching to say circles instead of squares, or some gradient brushes there, it forces me a new type of thinking. And you can see I decided to completely like destroy everything I was just doing a second before. And because I didn't feel like carrying on with that, so I decided to retry with more angulated shapes. So getting this stage, we're almost getting a bit of a Star Warsy helmet type. Is this long slits, which I didn't want to have, so I was like, I will lose that a bit later. It looks pretty Star Warsy right now. Which, you know, if you want to build a Star Wars type helmet, that might be the design I would love to develop. So I'm starting to fiddle a little bit at the stage where it's not really necessary. I still need to make sure I like the big shape overall. So adding some chunks and removing things. So now it's getting to a point it's getting messy without any ability to read the details. So I start to remove it and use a big brush. So I'm starting to lose the grip of what's going on. Usually I can distinguish certain parts of the face, or like some meaning there would be like a sensor, I don't know, the bottom filtering units. And if it becomes a mess, but I can't even read anything, and also it kind of looks like a mess, then I start to remove it and destroy a lot of things. So during this whole time lapse, I think I already had at least one design which I could have considered to be a sketch. And usually every time, I try to save as often as possible. So every time I save, I try to save the iterations. Every time I'm thinking that I'm going to do big, say, destruction, I will save and then carry on doing big changes. Then I can always come back to my previous design idea. So just scaling this around, because I was subtracting a lot of shapes. So if I subtract, the helmet naturally becomes too small. You can see here the helmet is kind of small and the nose is poking through really easily. Actually, I quite like right now this front, and I will even improve it in a second. So actually, I like this. I really like this front right now. It's a nice intersection of shapes and the different angles. Doesn't have like a rigid design to it. It feels more modern. There's no one line. The line goes in and out, a different depth. And that is essentially a sketch that can be presented to a client. Well, maybe without the top, but something needs to be done there. But if I was just experimenting with face shapes, it would be like, okay, it's a pretty cool face. I can just swap it. I can just reuse some kind of top and try multiple faces. So I'm applying this translucent shader so I can see through. I could also use the ghosted button there next to the layer. Honestly, that like a transparent material didn't give me any advantage at all. I think it was something that I used to do like 5 years back, 6 years back, and still every now and then use. I'm trying to extend this panel to the left and right, which, to be honest, I don't think it's a good idea. Doesn't vibe. And using the move tool to make it slightly more rounder. And the minus of the move tool also makes everything too smooth. Because the move tool is a surface tool, and every time I start to move it, it converts the layer into the surface mode, and then it comes back from the surface mode, and that essentially smooths everything out bit by bit. So I'm starting to fiddle with the top. And do a little bit of fiddling and changing small elements. I could have even divided this video in two, right? Making this helmet and making another one, which is so completely different. And so I decided to introduce this kind of T element in front. So make, in this case, I'm doing this kind of like a diamond-shaped goggles, diamond-shaped eyes, which could house some particular sensors. So I'm always on playing, right? I'm always quite often using pressing Control to remove elements, and then just pressing left mouse to add, and right clicking on shape to introduce a different angle to the plane when I use on plane. So here I'm don't really know how to proceed with the face, so start to introduce random shapes, remove stuff, add. And I want it to be fairly subtle with this particular helmet. So it'll be kind of like a lot of it's kind of what I call fiddling around. Using the move tool to introduce new shapes, sometimes radical shapes, but it's actually quite important to play with that every now and then, just to make a break, like lean out and just make a big move with the move tool. And even if it's ugly, it can give some interesting new ideas. So I was like fairly happy with the face. So I was thinking about creating an extra, kind of like an outside helmet. So we have like this face plate and the outside helmet. So helmet on a helmet. This idea didn't really go anywhere, but it was an interesting try. Trying some shapes that can contradict the face, but they definitely didn't really look that great. I either need to keep it and remove the goggles on the face or remove the top. So I dropped the helmet and decided to concentrate on the eyes, on the front eyes, right, cameras, goggles, as my main element, and to walk around them without introducing some really powerful shape like an outside external helmet. So I'm doing the back. I was struggling a little bit with the back. So to help myself, I decided to introduce these big, like battery type shapes. Like I was just thinking about them, like some kind of sensors of batteries, big protrusions. It kind of make it look a little bit more like 80s sci-fi. So I have to be a little bit careful. So I separated the head from the face. So just as a precaution, so don't by accident. Oh, first of all, here I rotated, right? I rotated the whole thing and just as an experiment. But then essentially I separated that as a precaution, so don't hit the face by accident while I'm working on the back. And I separated it using the split tool. So now I'm doing these long antennas. Again, now I look at this and I'm like, I look a little bit too much like 80s design. I jumped forward a little bit and I introduced some kind of like a radiator behind the head, introduced the array cut behind the head. I changed the front right, so it's a bit more streamlined, smooth head. I started to jump ahead a little bit because a lot of those things were changing the facial features again and again and trying to see if, in this case, I have more of a combination of, say, kind of like a leathery patch or synthetic patch, smooth surface, and a hard surface elements on around, fairly noisy hard surface elements around. And here I kind of jumped through to the end, and it's basically it. So thank you for watching and see you in the next video.